Hello fellow classmates and Professor Van Hoy, and welcome to my Capstone Research Project presentation. My research project is titled The Importance of a Cybersecurity RMF in Enterprise IT, and I hope you are able to follow along and learn from it the same way I did while writing it. Throughout our degree program, I noticed cybersecurity principles and best practices are discussed and utilized in many forms and fashions, which I was so happy to see as a cybersecurity professional. But since our degree, both the defense and forensics and engineering tracks are so technical in nature, there was not a lot of discussion or teachings on the high-level concepts of cybersecurity beyond hands-on tools and practices. This is why I chose to do my research and write my paper on a cybersecurity concept you may not have heard of, but likely will if this degree leads you to a federal or enterprise career. This leads me into slide 1. What is RMF, and how is it a high-level cybersecurity concept? Well, at the most broken down level, RMF stands for Risk Management Framework, and in terms of cybersecurity, most RMFs can be implemented on almost any type of information system or technology. All risk management frameworks consist of defined and repeatable steps to understand the system which needs to be secured, the stakeholders who are responsible for securing it, and accepting its risk, how much security the system requires based on its confidentiality, integrity, and availability, as well as implement security controls into the system based on mission and business needs. Some of the more mature RMFs also require a risk executive to accept any unmitigated and residual risk, and finally require the system to be continuously monitored for new threats and ensure the system is always functioning at an acceptable level of risk. To put RMF in perspective, I discussed a framework used by the Department of Defense with 7 steps, and probably 90% of what we learned in our entire degree is made up of just one of the steps, implementation of security controls. Of course, these numbers are just my own estimates from real-world experiences, but it really does show that the cyber field is miles wide and miles deep, with career paths and information that can be learned in each path. On the next slide, now that you have a very brief and basic understanding of what RMF is, hopefully my thesis will be better understood as well. So as many of you already know, or will soon come to find out firsthand if you are going to enter a career in cybersecurity, a lot of private, public, or even governmental organizations around the globe simply do not prioritize cybersecurity the way they should. Information system risk is such a new concept, as well as the rules that govern it, that it can be easily written off as too expensive or time-consuming to implement controls to fix cybersecurity vulnerabilities. For this reason, my thesis is cybersecurity RMF has been shown to be a cost-effective, high-level approach for top-notch cybersecurity posture, with the caveat of being implemented correctly and overseen by a properly appointed risk executive officer. Without a knowledgeable, cybersecurity-conscious risk executive, it can be easy for an organization to accept too much risk compared to what vulnerabilities may cost. Conversely, an organization may spend too much on their cybersecurity posture without the risk official to balance what is required to secure the system within budget. From my thesis as a jumping off point, I discussed 3 major topics involving RMF and the cybersecurity of an organization as a whole. Cost saving of RMF, inheritance and reciprocity through collaboration is argument 1, and discusses how the federal government utilizes RMF that can save a system's cybersecurity budget over 60% through higher level inheritance of security controls and sharing security controls with other systems that use that same framework. In this argument, I hope that the monetary savings of using an effective RMF is hard to ignore for any organization. The next supporting argument is titled, How Major Breaches Can Be Devastating. In this section, I discuss 3 major public companies that have been hit with massive compromises of data in the last few years, including Marriott, Equifax, and most recently, SolarWinds. The outcome of this section is to highlight how the aftermath of a preventable breach with a proper cybersecurity posture, including an RMF, will almost always be cheaper than accepting the risk of not implementing one from the get-go. And lastly, I pulled some templates from DoD's RMF Knowledge Service Repository for the final supporting topic, which is titled Practical RMF Application for a Commercial Supply Chain Software Development. In this section, I break down the security authorization package as if I were an information systems security manager for SolarWinds, and how they could have properly assessed risk on their Orion system for risk executive approval. While I do make a conclusion that SolarWinds could have possibly avoided their massive breach if they implemented an RMF from the ground up, this is stated as more of a cautionary tale. Next, we have my challenges when conducting research, writing, and the paper's methodology, as well as lessons learned. First and foremost, finding peer-reviewed studies on my topic were almost always theoretical in nature. By this, I mean a lot of professional writing about RMF discusses new frameworks that authors want to put into practice, usually for more specific types of systems, whether they be cloud, infrastructure, servers, or any others. Most documents and articles and references are, most documents and articles I reference are either from reputable.com sites or government sites, but luckily it did give me the full scope I needed. As for writing the paper, RMF is such a huge and deep topic, knowing what few parts to include in my paper to prove my thesis was a big writing block. This comes down to a lot of technical RMF documentation being so dense and detailed. With that being said, what I have learned from researching and writing this paper really boils down to cybersecurity needs specificity and trimming of a slide deck or paper that needs brevity, or if a slide deck or paper does need brevity, as well as not to expect all the answers without doing a lot of digging and reading, which is why I ended up having over 40 references on my paper. Finally, on my last slide, why the topic of cybersecurity is important and where I hope the future of RMF takes us. In my conclusion, I restate my thesis, and now with a large amount of evidence as to why cybersecurity RMF can save almost every organization time, reputation, and bottom line profits, whether they come from stockholders or taxpayers, the importance hopefully becomes clear. Companies, federal agencies, even big cities are being compromised almost daily. They need to realize cybersecurity and RMF is not going to be a money drain, but a necessity to prevent initial and even follow-up attacks that will be in their best financial interests going forward in our increasingly technological age. What needs to happen for us to get through there, though, is a bigger push from the top of these organizations to improve cybersecurity culture, budget, and innovation to stay ahead of these threat actors. Because right now, a lot of the world is and has been one step behind for decades.